Welcome to this week's episode of Hotter Than Health. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Eliza Gelman, and I'm here with you today to discuss the next 3 or 4 episodes of Hotter Than Health. It's going to be part of a series called the Hierarchy of Movement series. And I decided to call the series the Hierarchy of Movement because throughout training, throughout the past 10, 15 years that I have been incorporating resistance training, working in the fitness industry, being involved so deeply, whether it's personal lifestyle or my career, I've really noticed there are trends. And there is, depending on your goals, of course, there is a hierarchy of what we need to be prioritizing, what I truly believe to be the hierarchy of movement. What is the most substantial effect from our movement? Where is it coming from? What do we need to be focusing on? And which exercises should we be doing more of? Which should we be incorporating? And really not just talking about the order in which the significance goes, but what types of workouts are involved in that? What is the reasoning? What are the actual benefits? And then not only that, but what are some examples? What can you see? And how can you implement this into your day-to-day lifestyle? The way that this series is going to be broken up, it's going to be broken up into 4 different episodes. This episode is called Building Resistance. We're going to be talking about the importance of resistance training specifically for women. We have mostly women listening to this, but overall, this is going to be information that is based on metabolic health, strength, longevity, mood. I can't see why everyone wouldn't benefit from listening. We're then going to get into a little bit more information on recovery, another episode on HIIT and high intensity, fast twitch episodes, and then one on flexibility. And we're going to do it in that order because truthfully, when it comes to strength training and longevity and movement in general, I really believe that is the hierarchy. Resistance training, steady state, recovery, HIIT, and flexibility. We aren't going to do a whole episode on steady state movement, which is like zone 2, moderate cardiovascular for heart health. I'm going to refer you back to 2 episodes that I've done on zone 2 training, and there's so much information in there. Highly recommend going to check those out. But for now, this episode, we're kicking off the Hierarchy of Movement series with building resistance. Before we get into today's episode, I want to say a thank you for today's show sponsor. We love Organifi. We love you so much, and we are so grateful for you and your products. Organifi has been a partner of the show for years and years, and each morning I wake up, I do a scoop. Jason does a scoop of the green apple greens powder. We also substitute we use different kinds of protein powder. He has one that he prefers. I have one that I prefer, and I love the coconutty base of the vanilla protein powder. And of course, the collagen supplements, the magnesium supplements, you cannot go wrong. If you are interested in elevating your health and wellness routine, avoiding sugars, increasing the amount of adaptogens you're taking in, which is going to help to regulate the nervous system, especially if you are someone who likes to tap into caffeine in a big way, the greens powder is for you. I love the green apple flavor. It's not full of chemicals, preservatives, nasty ingredients. It is organic, glyphosate residue free, and preservative, just gnarly stuff free. I wouldn't be ingesting it in my body every single day if I didn't absolutely trust it. You can check out Organifi and all of Organifi's product for 20% off using the code HTH at checkout. Again, that is Organifi.com/HTH for 20% off of any of the items at checkout. Let's get into resistance training. There are several things that you hear when you start talking about resistance training. One, a lot of times, and I'm talking about women, and I'm not saying this in a fully general term where everyone is saying these things, but these are some of the most commonly heard comments when it comes to resistance training. One is, oh, I want to start weight training and resistance training to feel stronger and feel better. One is I want to have a butt. I want to see more definition in my arms. I want to feel stronger, da da da. And then another is, I don't want to get bulky. We could do an entire episode on being bulky, on how it would be so much work to get bulky for a woman. There are, of course, extenuating circumstances, maybe a certain medication that you're on, or a certain type of metabolic DNA, something that you were born with that would affect this. But overall, getting bulky is not necessarily where people trend when it comes to resistance training, especially for women. Oftentimes, it's actually the opposite. Oftentimes, we see that women start to get smaller and more toned, meaning their density might go up. Sure, the scale might stay the same or even increase, but clothes tend to fit a little better, and we start to see more shape and definition and actually accentuate some of the curves of the natural female body. When it comes to resistance training, what we're going to be talking about, yes, you can start out with body weight. You can start out with light weights, especially if you are recovering from injuries. You might be someone who maybe you played soccer for a long time and you had ACL, MCL issues. Maybe you have an ankle issue and there's something that restricts your range of motion. Overall, this is going to be a focus on how to increase the weight that you are working with in the gym to a point that you are not really able to rep out, 15 to 20 reps. I'll do some Pilates classes and the weights are 1 to 3 pounds, which, look, I love these classes, don't get me wrong, but they're for a certain time and a place. And what we're looking at is movements that could reach failure maybe within the maximum 12 to 15 rep range. If you can do 15 reps, likely you can increase the weight. We'll talk about that more in a second. My personal standpoint is that building or resistance training, which is training with weights that are of substantial size, doesn't have to be necessarily your body weight or heavier, but there is a weight that challenges you, that gets your heart rate up with not repping out a ton of reps, meaning anywhere from 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 reps is where you're going to get in the zone. And by that last rep, you really can't go anymore. Then you take a break and you get back into it. But I truly believe that when it comes to the hierarchy of movement, building resistance is one that women should focus on at least 3 times per week. This is due to the benefits of metabolic health. It has to do with the fact that with a better and healthier metabolic rate, you are reducing risk for so many different chronic diseases. And then also simply the fact that it is better for our energy. We gain more muscle, which is a natural energy life giver. It is also something that will help us burn fat, and it also helps us to it also helps us to increase our confidence. Physically, you're working on your posture, that's great, but when you walk into a gym and you accomplish this type of workout, there is a mental shift that happens. There is a trigger that is switched off in our brain that ignites a certain type of confidence that you do not get otherwise. And this comes from not only feeling that sense of pride and strength, but also the sense that you accomplished something that was a challenge. When you wake up and you, like the quote says, eat the frog, you do the hard thing in the morning, it makes everything else seem much more attainable. When it comes to weight training, something to really consider, I remember when I was in high school and I would run a lot. I would do different workouts, yes, but they were all, I would be on the elliptical. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was at a YMCA, or I would, go do a track practice, but weight training wasn't really in my repertoire. It wasn't really in my day-to-day training. As I got into college, after a pretty gnarly car accident, I was told, hey, you might not be able to walk again. And then quickly I found out that I could, which is amazing. That's a whole nother story. Then my training got more into, okay, how can I strengthen my bones? How can I make my body more resilient and adaptable to stressors? And how can I create strength within? That's when I started to get into weight training, which was my sophomore year of college. End of sophomore year of college, beginning of junior year of college. When I got more into weight training, I noticed that the first thing I noticed, truly, not a butt, not definition of my shoulders, not anything like that, my face changed. And I was obviously I did drink in college, but I wasn't someone who was partying all night and going out all the time. I wasn't like the biggest partier in college. But my face changed. And if you've ever gone through any sort of physical transformation, the first thing you notice is your face, because you look in the mirror, you look at your phone, it's always the first thing that we see. And I didn't notice how much inflammation I was carrying in my body until about 6 months after I really started incorporating weights into my routine. And I remember seeing a photo of myself and I thought, oh my gosh. It was 2 photos back to back. It was about 6 months apart. There was one photo where I was smiling. I was happy. It was good, still healthy. But I remember I was smiling and my cheeks were so high up, they closed my eyes, which of course, happy, smiling, that's great. But in the next photo, my eyes were wide and bright. And yes, I still had like cheeks and a heart-shaped face, but there was something more defined. There was a strength to it. There was less, it just looked like less of a baby face. I thought I had more of a baby face until I started doing more resistance training. And I thought, wow, there's really got to be something to this, because I had noticed I was eating better, I guess, but eating more. And really not doing too much weight training, but simply incorporating it at all. Going from 0 to 2 or 3 times a week was massive for me. Now, each person, it wasn't my goal for my face to change, but that was just the first physical sign that I saw. Also, I was in a college where there weren't that many girls weight training. The only girls that I ever saw weight training were student athletes, and I wasn't a student athlete. So I was training in a gym where I trained alone. Once in a while, a friend would train with me, but they would train and they would come do 10 squats and be like, dang, this is hard. And then they would go do their track workout or whatever abs they were doing. And that's no shame at all. I did that too. But when I would go into the weight training room, there was something that you had to tap into, some type of confidence that you had to tap into to be able to hold your own around groups of guys, ask for a piece of equipment. Hey, someone says, hey, are you almost done with that? You actually have 4 more sets left. No, I've got 4 more sets left. You're welcome to work in, but I'm going to be here, and you stand your ground. There's some type of confidence that you have to instill within yourself that doesn't make you a jerk at all. It simply makes you're just respecting yourself. Now, interestingly enough, as I started to see my body change, I started to do more research into this, and I started to really understand what was happening. This got me into understanding more about our metabolic functions. We hear metabolic rates and we hear, oh, they have a fast metabolism, and you just think, oh, it's someone that can eat whatever they want and they never gain weight. Or by comparison, maybe it's a hyper situation where maybe the metabolism is running slightly slower. The incinerator within is not super hot, and it takes people a little longer to lose weight. Maybe they are storing more in certain places. Or you're exhausted, or your skin is going crazy and acting up. Maybe you cannot sleep. Maybe you can't get warm. Maybe there's, hormones are fully disrupted. When it comes to your metabolic health, there is so much research that shows that increased physical activity and exercise are associated with a stronger metabolic health, which reduces chronic disease risk. And when I say chronic disease, we are talking, and I'm going to link all of these resources in the show notes, but when we're talking about chronic disease, we're talking about things like cancer. We're talking about type 2 diabetes, which, by the way, is one of the number one killers in the US, which is preventable. And I'm sorry, shame on me if you want to, that's fine. But when they say that Ozempic is the number one and it is the first line of defense against type 2 diabetes, best of luck selling me on that. When you say that, when you have so much research in all these different ways, double-blind placebo effect, you have, honestly, I don't know that many other types of research, but you know what I'm saying. They're just not coming to me off the top of my head. There is so much research and long stemmed research showing that increasing your physical activity, whether it's walking, resistance training, stretching, yoga, running, swimming, whatever, it is associated with reduced chronic risk. So when we know that cancer rates are up, when we know that type 2 diabetes are up, heart rate is the number one killer in the US, when we know that these are all metabolic diseases, why would we not do everything in our power, especially if, God has given us the ability to move our bodies, and we should be grateful for that and not take it for granted? Why wouldn't we do everything we can to increase our metabolic health, to reduce those chronic diseases? I'd like to be here for a long time. Now, when it comes to, I pulled a couple of charts, and this is coming from the National Library of Medicine, and this is published in 2019 from a Sports Med Health Science. In the abstract, it's basically talking about chronic diseases are the leading cause of death worldwide and increasing prevalence in all age groups, genders, and ethnicities. This is not me saying that when you're old, you'll get cancer and you'll do all these things and you'll have a heart attack. No. It is absolutely shown that multiple chronic diseases now affect children and adolescents as well as adults. When we say that, it goes as deep as to say it is so ingrained into our culture. And yes, this has to do, there are different demographics that are more susceptible to situations that aren't supported and that don't necessarily have all of the resources and the information and the knowledge to know, hey, I grew up being raised around, sugary cereal or not knowing where my next meal was or whatever the situation is. And they may not be privy to some of the information and knowledge showing that you can work away from that. There are steps you can take, and you aren't just genetically predisposed to obesity. And when we know that, I think I heard a statistic, I did hear a statistic the other day, and I don't want to cite where it was from, but there was something alarming. It was something like high 40s to 50% of children in the US are pre-diabetic or considered more obese for their age. And that scared me. A lot of people who listen to this podcast, we grew up around processed foods a lot. We are starting to hear more about reduced processed foods, but we also know that we are going to be potentially raising the children that are going to have to fight against these systems that show up in sugar, that show up in marketing and branding, that make it seem so appealing to just destroy our metabolic health. Drink this Gatorade, drink this vitamin water, have these gushers, enjoy this cereal, have these bars while you travel, go get donuts and ice cream and coffee with 10 pumps of sugar. And this is not me to villainize, but I am saying it is a weapon for addiction. And when we can arm ourselves with this type of information, knowing that it starts at such a young age and it starts with the parents, this is what we need to arm ourselves with. Now, this is saying global societies are being negatively impacted by the increasing prevalence of chronic diseases, which is directly related to rising healthcare expenditures, workforce complications regarding attendance and productivity, military personnel recruitment, and academic success. When I read this is so frustrating to me because I don't even like to call it a healthcare system. I think modern medicine is a blessing and amazing and magical. However, I believe that it is more beneficial for acute care. Like if there's a problem during childbirth, if I have a broken arm, if there is something that needs to be, ruptures, I'm going for modern medicine. But when they say to fix all of your metabolic issues, you need a pill, I'm sorry, check please. It's not, to me, I know that there's certain circumstances where it's super necessary. I'm not saying it's not necessary all the time. But when it's your first line and there is no information being given, specific information being given on how we could improve our health through changes in our physical movement as well as our nutritional choices. Okay, let's take a step back. We know that metabolic health is shown to affect chronic disease. Now, like I said, I pulled a study, and in this study, it shows that we're going to go through some numbers real quick. Just picture a pie chart. And this pie chart is just three things. The pie chart is separated into three parts, one of them being non-communicable diseases. Non-communicable diseases are diseases that basically, like a disease that can't be just spread. Then there's communicable diseases, maternal, neonatal, nutritional. Communicable diseases would be things that can be passed down or passed on. And then another one is injury. Now, it says that there has been such a shift. This is in a span of, how many years is this? Why don't you show up clearly? Oh, this is from 1990 to 2016. So 26 years. In 26 years, 1990, the amount of global deaths caused by non-communicable disease, remember, being a disease that is not transmissible directly from one person to another. So like autoimmune, strokes, Parkinson's, cancers, Alzheimer's. In 1990, that was 57. 57. More than half. Okay. In 2016, same types of diseases, killing 72%. That went from 57% to 72%, 26 years. 1990 to 2016. It's been another 10 years. Picture the pie chart being around just over 50% for these non-communicable diseases, these metabolic diseases. Now picture that pie chart being 75% full, nearly 75% full. To me, the frustrating part is that truly what we can be preventing, we are told we can't. And it is, of course, in a dream world, our government and our policies and our leadership would be taking a stand for global health and healthcare and truly instilling in us the yes, you can mentality. Yes, you can have faith that you can solve these problems before they start, or if they have already started, there is a way out, there is a solution. You do not have to have a chronic disease, and if you do, there are ways to increase your internal metabolic health so that you can begin fighting, or you can set a standard for the next generation to show them what can be done. It is never too late. It is never too late, and I believe that we are in a society that's being fed stories of I can't. And the only times that we really see people talking about yes, I can is when you hear these miracle stories. And I don't believe that we need to see a million miracle stories a day or I don't think we need to see that many miracle stories to know that we can do it. Yeah, a miracle story is great and amazing, and so happy that these people have, overcome so much, but we should just know that based on all of these studies and all of our honestly, our common sense, we should be able to say, yes, I can turn this around on my own. When it comes to prevention, it's like, okay, if there's an infection, then yes, we want to do what we can. If there is something that, like a common cold, we don't want to pass that around all the time, but those are things that are going to happen. Chronic disease does not have to be that big of a killer in our society. So going back to weight training, here's some cool things that I find when it comes to metabolic health. Metabolic health can deal with fat loss because it naturally burns muscle. One of the things I think at a surface level, we all think, oh man, it'd be great to burn some fat, gain some muscle. I want to feel strong, have good posture, have good confidence, feel like I can fit into my clothes, all that good stuff. Then you have fat loss. Fat loss is something that sounds like a task. And while there are tasks that help support it, it can be an ongoing process in your body all the time, while you are sleeping, while you're working, while you're walking, while you're just sitting, breathing, blinking. The more natural muscle you have within your body, it is a natural fat burner. It has a thermogenic effect that basically has a heating effect in your body. And not to say that fat doesn't have an insulating property as well, but there is that, burning effect. Then there is something called EPOC, which is EPOC. It's also known as the afterburn effect. So this is after you do a resistance training workout. So EPOC is more commonly known again as the afterburn effect. It refers to all of the oxygen and energy from calories that your body takes in and uses after exercises to help repair and recover. So not only are you getting, with resistance training, say you're doing deadlifts, squats, lunges, using weight, or chest press, back, glutes, hip thrust, whatever, you are making these micro tears in your muscles. Your muscles need energy. They need to focus on repairing, needs oxygen, all of this good stuff to recover the muscles, and that takes energy. And when you are using your energy, you're burning calories. So there is that after effect of it, again, the afterburn effect that helps to burn even more calories after your workout. Research shows that strength training is especially effective at raising that afterburn effect. That's because, generally speaking, strength training sessions cause more physiological stress to the body compared to cardiovascular disease, even higher intensity cardio intervals. However, it is worth noting that overall exercise intensity is what makes the biggest impact. So squats, deadlifts, bench press with heavy weights are going to be much more effective at raising your afterburn effect compared to bicep curls and tricep extensions with light weights. Meaning, essentially, as we've been saying, the bigger muscles in your body that you're using with heavier weights, it's going to be more effective and give you even more of that afterburn effect. And you may be thinking, okay, well, how big of a difference does this really make? Do these small afterburn effects have that much, do they really give that much of a difference in my body and my metabolic health? Well, in one research study of young women, basal metabolic rate spiked by 4.2% in 16 hours following a strength training session that lasted an hour and 40 minutes, the equivalent of burning an extra 60 calories on average. And you might be thinking, okay, that doesn't seem like a lot of bang for my buck. It is more than if you were to do a very small lightweight workout, because the recovery time is just much quicker. It's basically the more you put into the workout, the more you're going to get out of your workout. This is not to say that you need to be doing resistance training every single day, crushing your body every single day. There is going to be that time that goes into repairing. We're going to have a whole episode on repairing, and I cannot wait. Overall, what you need to know about this episode is that there are so many benefits to resistance training, and especially as women, as we age, consider bearing a child. Maybe if you are in your 30s like me, and maybe you want to have a kid, great. Maybe if you don't, this is just information for you. You think about the muscles that are being used. It's basically like having a watermelon growing on your stomach. And in that situation, you have to have your postural muscles. Your back needs to be strong so that you can support it, so that you're not just dumping into your lower back. You're going to need strong glutes so that you can get up out of a chair, so that you can hinge on your hips, and then you can push out that baby. There is a lot of physiological stress that goes into just carrying around a body. Like, the more muscle you have, the better your metabolic health is, and the better you are able to be energized and taking care of that child while it's growing inside of you, while you're raising it. Research shows that starting as early as age 30, I'm 31, so if I hadn't started, I'd be late. And if you're late, it's never too late. I didn't even mean to say late. Don't go back and quote me on that. I'm sorry. You're never late. If you haven't started resistance training, or if you haven't done it in 6 months or a year, 2 years, maybe you're like, after college, I was a student athlete and I just am scarred. I don't want to do strength training anymore. I totally understand. Start slow, start small, listen to a podcast. You don't always need to go into like some intense room and throw around a barbell. It can be slow, it can be steady, just make sure there's some intensity to it. Excuse me. But research shows starting as early as age 30, the body begins to slowly lose muscle mass, with women losing up to 15% of their total body muscle per decade by age 50. Okay, so if I'm 30, by age 50, whatever I have right now will deplete by 15%. Apart from declines in strength, the declining muscle mass comes with a declining metabolism. A sports med specialist with Hoag Orthopedic Institute of California, Amelia Refsky, she tells the magazine, this decline in metabolic rate is actually one driving factor of the weight that women generally tend to put on after we naturally hit our peak muscle levels in our 20s. And so this is, again, research. I haven't said it yet. This is research from Tufts University. What I love about this is it's not saying that this is not saying that there is nothing we can do. It is mostly saying this is the information that we know for the majority of women, or not the majority of women, but based on the women that we have researched, there is a total body muscle decline decade after decade. And if we know, and we've talked about the compound effect before on this podcast, the little things that we do every single day. I was actually just talking to a banker the other day. We had questions about a savings account, and he said that people who put in, easy numbers, $100 a month into a investment account, $100 a month for 10 years, and then they don't put anything else in it for the next 30 years, okay, are way more likely, they compared it to someone who waited 10 years and then put money in, that exact same amount of money in, for the next 20 years. He said that the person who put in money for 10 years earlier actually had longer lasting compound effects because that money was already in the account. He didn't have to put in a ton more, but he was able to maintain it. So it's essentially saying the earlier you start, the better. There's no magic age. There's no magic number. I'm not saying that if you don't start by age 15, you're lost, or if you're 30 years old and you haven't started, if you're 40 years old, you haven't started. There is never the wrong time. There is never a bad time to start. There is never a wrong time to start. And if you think that you can't, you can. Don't overthink it. You don't need a fancy gym membership. You don't need to have a squat rack. You don't need to have someone yelling at you the whole time. You don't need to have 2 hours. You just need 30 minutes. And if you got nothing around you, grab a few books. Maybe you get a band. Maybe you don't spend $1, but you have something heavy in your house. Maybe you can put some books in a book bag and do some squats like that. There's a lot of things that we can do even when we're traveling. If we can incorporate 3 times per week on a consistent basis, knowing that of course you're going to go out of town, you're going to travel, like we're going to be gone for 2-3 weeks, and I'm not going to have any resistance training. We'll be moving our body every single day, but I'm not going to be lifting weights. Now, knowing that you have that baseline of 3-ish times per week to have that increased weight training session anywhere from 45 to 60 minutes. Doesn't need to be lifting weights every single time. Take breaks in between sets, but do something. Something is absolutely better than nothing when it comes to weight training. For all of these reasons, and look, my notes are long. Notes are long, and I could go on longer, and we'll probably do another resistance training episode just because truly there's so much here. When it comes to resistance training, this is the number one in the hierarchy of movement series because it correlates so strongly to a healthy metabolic rate, which if with a healthy metabolic rate, you are reducing your risk of chronic diseases, which are now the 72%. 72% of global deaths. Okay? When we're looking at the amount of, this isn't even in the US, this is global, 72%. And it's going to keep getting higher unless we incorporate this I can, not the, what's easy. What you put into it, you will get out. So if you're just thinking, a pill, before you try these things, again, talk to your doctor. I'm not a doctor saying don't take a pill. Like, please don't misconstrue what I'm saying, but I am saying that you have it within you. And if you can move your body at all, you've been given a gift, and I highly recommend using it because it's a multi-tool. This is the Swiss Army knife of workouts where it is going to increase your metabolic health. It will help you fit better in your clothes. You're going to have more confidence, more energy, and it is the most efficient and effective. So if you only can get 3 workouts in per week, maybe they are resistance training and the rest is stretching. Maybe you just walk around, take the kids, do what you can, walk around your apartment. Maybe you invest $200 in a walking desk, put it under your desk, whatever it is, you can. And if you're saying that you can't or you just don't want to, please don't be the person who looks back and says, I wish I have or I should have. Obviously, there's a plan in place for each person in the world, but I don't think that we would be given the gift and the blessing of being able to move so much if we weren't supposed to use it. And if there's an effective way to benefit our overall health and longevity, you better bet that's what I'm going to do. Again, I could go on forever, and our next episode is going to be from the Hierarchy of Movement series, it's going to be all about recovery. And yes, recovery is next. It's before HIIT, it's before flexibility, and it is because it is so important. And I will get into more testimonial and why I believe that on next week's episode. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't already, hit like or subscribe. Make sure you're following us on Instagram at ElizaG_wellness or Hotter Than Health podcast. And if you're listening on Spotify, make sure you hit follow. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, go and leave us a review. I will talk to you all next Thursday.